Welcome to the Bucks County Community College Baking and Pastry Arts Podcast. I am Chef John Angeline. Today in the bake shop, we are making pie dough. Pie dough is a simple product with regard to its ingredients. Just flour, fat, water, salt, and sometimes sugar. The procedure you use when combining those ingredients can produce dough that is flaky in consistency or one that is mealy or more tender in consistency. Here are some details about the ingredients. A low-protein flour, such as all-purpose or pastry flour, should be used in pie dough. These types of flours will develop less gluten in the dough. The fat you use in pie dough can be vegetable shortening, lard, butter, or a mixture of fats. Vegetable shortening or lard will produce the flakiest crust. These fats have the right consistency and a higher melting point than butter. Those characteristics help to produce a flaky crust. Butter can be successfully used in pie dough. Butter will give a dough better flavor. It is more expensive to use than shortening and a little bit harder to handle and roll out. If you do make pie dough with butter, you need to use less water when mixing the dough because of the water contained in the butter. Using a combination of shortening and butter will achieve both flakiness and flavor. The water for pie dough must be cold, 40 degrees or colder. You should use ice water. Using cold water will help to maintain proper dough temperature. Adding the correct amount of water is also important. If too much water is added, the crust will be tough due to overdevelopment of gluten. Too little water and the dough will not hold together. Sugar can be used in pie dough, or it can be omitted if you're using the dough for a savory item such as quiche. Using sugar in the dough will help to create a tender dough by weakening the gluten structure, and it will also contribute to the color of the crust. Salt has two functions in pie dough. It has some tenderizing and conditioning effect on the gluten in the flour, and it is used for flavor. There are two basic types of pie dough, flaky and mealy. The French name for a flaky pastry dough used for pies is pâte brisée. For flaky dough, the fat is cut or rubbed into the flour until the particles of shortening are about the size of peas or hazelnuts. In other words, the fat is left in pieces and not completely blended with the flour. After water is added and the dough is rolled out, the lumps of fat and moistened flour are flattened and become flakes of dough separated by layers of fat. For mealy dough, the fat is blended into the flour more than when you are making flaky dough. The mixture of fat and flour should look more like coarse cornmeal. Coating the flour with fat this way has several results. The crust is more tender than flaky dough because less gluten can develop. Less water is needed when mixing because the flour won't absorb as much as in flaky dough. And lastly, the baked crust will resist sogginess more than a flaky crust. An important difference to remember between flaky pie dough and mealy pie dough is how much the fat is blended with the flour. Any scrap pieces of pie dough can be reused, but they will have a tougher texture than fresh pie dough. Anytime you gather up the dough and re-roll it, it will develop a tougher texture. This additional mixing will develop gluten, making the dough elastic and difficult to use. Procedure to produce pie dough. 1. Sift the dry ingredients into a mixing bowl. The salt and sugar can be sifted with the flour or they can be dissolved in the water. 2. Add the fat and rub or cut the fat into the flour until you have achieved the desired consistency. For flaky dough, that would be until the fat and flour particles are about the size of peas. for mealy dough until the particles resemble coarse cornmeal. Do not overmix the fat into the flour. Stop when you have achieved the desired consistency. 3. Add the ice water to the mixture. Mix gently only until the water has been absorbed. Once again, do not overwork the dough. At this point, the dough can be rolled out. The dough will be soft and will roll out easily. For better results, though, the dough should be allowed to rest in the refrigerator. Flatten the dough to about a 1-inch thickness, cover, and refrigerate for a couple of hours or overnight. This chilling time will relax the gluten in the dough, enable you to roll out the dough easier, and produce a crust that shrinks less. It will also allow the fat in the dough to firm up, preventing it from melting into the dough. A 9-inch pie requires about 9 to 10 ounces of dough for the bottom crust and 7 to 8 ounces of dough for a top crust. Making good pie dough and crust is one of the keys to making good pies. I am Chef John Angeline, and I'll see you in the bake shop. Thanks for listening to the Bucks County Community College Baking and Pastry Arts Podcast.